Thank you, Jeanette. As we've heard, we're going to hear from Tim OLeary as our keynote speaker this morning. Tim joined Telstra in 2011 as the Chief Sustainability Officer. In this role, he has executive responsibility for strategic community and reputational initiatives, corporate responsibility, and Telstra's environment strategy and employee sustainability. He's a board member of the Telstra Foundation and the Telstra Philippines Foundation. Prior to joining Telstra, Tim spent 20 years in senior corporate affairs, HR and sustainability roles at the National Australia Bank and Mobil Oil Australia. He holds an honours degree in arts and postgraduate degree in philosophy from the University of Melbourne. He's a member of the Council at Newman College, on the board of the National Centre for Indigenous Excellence, and a former chairman of Emotion 21, a small arts organisation catering for the needs of young people with Down syndrome. Following Tim's keynote, we're going to spend 15 minutes with some question time, so I encourage you to be preparing your questions for Tim while he speaks to us this morning. To deliver our keynote today, please welcome Tim OLeary.
Well, thank you very much, Dale, for that very kind welcome and introduction. Can I begin by thanking Marucci for that really beautiful welcome to country, and acknowledge the traditional owners on the land in which we meet, and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge Jeanette Wright, the CEO and State Librarian, and her staff for their leadership in addressing contemporary issues of literacy. It's very good to be here in Brisbane this morning. It's a bit chilly. When I got off the plane, I wasn't quite expecting that. It was yesterday in Melbourne was the coldest start to winter, I think, for almost 30 years. So it was very, very chilly. So it's really lovely to be here at the State Library at an event focusing on digital literacy. And digital literacy is really an area of significant interest and investment by Telstra. In fact, it is absolutely fundamental to us achieving our purpose, which is to create a brilliant connected future for everyone. And a purpose like that is a little unusual in corporate life, particularly with that accent on the for everyone. So very deep in the organisation there is a powerful sense of social equity, and that idea of social equity and its interrelationship with literacy is something that I would hope to expand on a little bit further. In my role as Chief Sustainability with Telstra, one of the privileges I have is overseeing our community investments and partnerships to achieve that purpose. Amongst other things, this includes supporting the essential role of libraries as centres of learning in our communities. So I'd like to particularly commend the State Library of Australia for their involvement in the National and State Libraries Australasia Literacy and Learning Project, and for showing leadership in reimagining libraries in the Go Digital Queensland age. I recognise that in many ways, literacy is the very reason for the existence of libraries, and that this came to the fore in the 19th century with the development of public libraries that promoted literacy as a common good in which everyone in society could participate. So there's a long-standing tradition regarding the importance of literacy for social inclusion outcomes. Indeed, Ian McShane points out in his article on public libraries, digital literacy and participatory culture, and I quote, "The role of public libraries in enhancing literacy, access to information and civic engagement have been consistently advocated as a solution to emerging social problems." And again, through the Australian Library and Information Association, ALIA picks this up explicitly in its policy statements on libraries and literacy, saying that, and I quote, "Rapid social change, the emphasis on lifelong learning, the increasing rate of technological change, and the movement towards an information-based society are factors which suggest, as never before, that literacies are an essential instrument for effective participation in society. And to me, this hints at the fundamental importance of digital literacy as an essential instrument for effective participation in today's society, for social inclusion, for enabling a sense of community, which is so important to individual well-being and civic contribution, and for engendering acceptance and respect for others in our multicultural, multi-faith global society. In this 21st century, with technology rapidly changing our society, the concept of literacy has assumed new meanings. Digital literacies are now the rising wave of communication specialisation, wherein the majority of people have technologies at the very tip of their fingers, not only to communicate, but to create, to manipulate, to design, to contribute, to form and maintain relationships, and to find a sense of identity. We do live in amazing technological times. Almost every year there is something new that promises to change our lives for the better. For example, I never thought we'd actually be talking into our wristwatches, like Dick Tracy, some of you might remember, but it's now becoming a reality with the Apple Watch. I never thought you'd be able to see a grandchild take their first faltering steps, even though they are in a town hundreds of kilometres away. But that is now a reality thanks to good quality video transmission on your smartphone or tablet. I never thought that today people around the world would be creating 6 million years worth of internet video every month. But then I suppose there's a lot of grandchildren in the world. I never thought I would check in for my flight from the comfort of my home and simply present my mobile phone at the boarding gate to check in. I never thought I would be silently counting the number of steps I do and recording it each day with a band around my wrist that talks to my smartphone to remind me whenever I haven't done enough. I never thought that last month around 14 million Australians would use Facebook to share their lives with family and friends, or around the same number visit YouTube to watch a video, or around 6 million people reading someone else's blog online. And I never thought we could be seated closer to the front row for a performance of the New York Met Opera, or get to backstage at interval. But now it is a reality thanks to high bandwidth connections and higher definition cinema. And these technological developments barely scratch the surface of the remarkable revolution that is well underway in our economy, with enormous investments in digital transformation by governments, universities, civil societies, and commercial organisations like Telstra. For example, there is the very large Commonwealth investment in the National Broadband Network, NBN, which aims to bring high-speed broadband to every household, school, library and business around the country. There is the Commonwealth's Digital Transformation Office, recently set up, which will coordinate fundamental changes to the way people transact with agencies such as Centacare and Medibank. By 2017, it is expected that the majority of these transactions will be done electronically in what is referred to as a digital-first strategy. Then there is Telstra's own ongoing investments in our wireless network, around $1 billion this year. This includes a commitment to providing 4G high-speed mobile internet connectivity when out and about to almost 90% of the population. We're also investing to create Australia's largest network of Wi-Fi hotspots, together with access to millions of hotspots overseas when travelling. So many services we use every day are going digital. Banking, insurance, news, books and magazines, receiving and paying our bills, topping up our public transport passes, education services, movies on demand, entertainment ticketing, travel and accommodation, hiring a taxi, house hunting, trading used goods and job seeking, to name a few. Even our cars are going digital. Recently, Tesla, who seem to be at the forefront of innovation when it comes to consumer electric vehicles, bought a couple of their Australian models to the Telstra car park in Melbourne. And some of my environment team members had a test drive. And it's uncanny to think that the new features and improvements to that car will be added via a software update, delivered, of course, over the Telstra mobile network. And it's really interesting, when we talk about the internet and the Internet of Things. And one of the really interesting things is, perhaps for the first time in human history now, that access to the internet is directly linked to human flourishing, to socio-economic well-being. That is a new thing in our history, and it's a fundamental importance, in terms of digital literacy, to ensure that that link is there and people are able to flourish. As libraries well know, we are living in an information society, and wealth, economic, intellectual, cultural and ethical, depends on the ability to navigate the knowledge space. It depends on literacy. It depends on digital literacy. So at Telstra, digital literacy is an essential part of our overall strategy for digital inclusion. We want to ensure that all Australians can connect, participate and interact safely in the digital world, irrespective of age, income, ability, locality or disadvantage. And we have a range of programs that seek to make communication services available, affordable, accessible and safe and secure. To give but one example, in regard to affordability alone, over the last decade, Telstra has provided benefits to the value of more than $2 billion in low-income support to help millions of Australians stay connected. This recognises that despite appearances, not everyone is enjoying the benefits of these new technologies. Professor Julian Thomas at Swinburne University talks about the digital divide as perhaps growing narrower but deeper. And for example, while 84% of Queensland households are connected to the internet, on average, only 59% of the lowest income households are connected. While 84% of Queenslanders aged 15 or over regularly access the internet, on average, only 46% of older Queenslanders do so. Only 76% of Australians aged 15 or over, born in a non-English speaking country, regularly access the internet. And only 58% of people with a disability access the internet at home. And finally, in relation to remote Indigenous Australians, 86% are without home internet, compared to 37% for remote non-Indigenous populations. This recognition of the narrower but deeper informs our overall digital inclusion strategy and underpins, for example, our particular focus on seniors in regard to digital literacy programs. Our tech-savvy seniors partnerships with state governments provide digital literacy training opportunities for many tens of thousands of seniors, often through libraries, community colleges and other online video resources. It is designed to help older Australians with little or no technology experience learn new skills, improve their confidence, understand the relevance and value of technology, and embrace the benefits of the digital world. But we also recognise that digital inclusion is much more than just having access to or being able to use an internet service with the relevant devices, such as a computer, smartphone or tablet. Digital literacy pushes the digital inclusion paradigm towards participation, effective participation in the rapidly developing digital economy and digital society. So for us at Telstra, our definition of digital literacy includes technical literacy, that is being able to successfully navigate technologies, media literacy, having a working knowledge of the strengths and limitations of available platforms, and the capacity to judge the quality and the reliability of online sources. And finally, social literacy, understanding that the social norms that apply in online settings. For Telstra, enhancing digital literacy helps to mitigate online risks and foster meaningful and effective participation. No longer is the digital divide concerned so much with questions of access to technology or of being able to use it, but participation becomes the end goal that has important implications for social inclusion outcomes. Digital literacy also pushes the traditional literacy paradigms towards participation by adding a brand new element. One way it has been described is that it heralds a move from read-only to read-write abilities. It goes beyond just being a critical reader or user of information and adds a new dimension of creating and communicating. Digital literacy, therefore, is defined by its interactive nature, the way in which knowledge is built through dialogue, through actually using the new technology services and gaining confidence through experience. Sora Park from the University of Canberra puts it this way, and I quote, "Digital media literacy involves user participation and production. In the digital media environment, it is not sufficient to become a smart consumer. One should become a sophisticated citizen." And this is the really exciting part about digital literacy and its relationship to social inclusion. If we can equip, encourage and inspire people not just to access and understand digital devices and digital media, but to go to the next step of using it to create knowledge and to share it in an ethical manner, then we may well be on the way to improving social inclusion through such participatory practices. Now, we know that technology can be a little scary for some people, and others may not see the point in mastering the newfangled gadgets that seem to need tending all the time or else they stop working. Mastering digital literacy has been likened to mastering a foreign language that is complex and of questionable use for those who have not grown up with it. But the research tells us that this is problematic. To quote Sora Park again, "Information poverty increasingly is becoming an important indicator of social exclusion, particularly in the digital age. The acquiring of digital media literacy is a learned process, as with any kind of literacy." The last point perhaps encourages us towards another metaphor that has been used to describe the gaining of digital literacy, that of learning to ride a bicycle. We might be a bit wobbly at first, but after a while it opens up much wider horizons and faster progress, as well as being good exercise. In our experience, one of the game changers for teaching digital literacy has been the introduction of connected tablet devices. This is a fundamental leap in the ease of using digital devices, away from keyboards and mice, to using your fingers to directly control and manipulate content. Not to mention the many accessibility features built into modern operating systems that can enlarge text or increase its contrast, read out what's on screen, convert spoken instructions to commands and written text, and even connect right out of the box with a Braille output device for deafblind users. One of the really exciting features of the development of smartphones and tablets is this concept of universal design. So when you sort of look at your iPad, it's designed such that if I was deaf, I could still use it. If I was blind, I could still use it, you know. So this whole sense of universal design is bringing accessibility of the devices in a way that's never occurred before. And it's amazing to sit alongside an older person at a tech-savvy seniors training session who, incidentally, had been previously involved in academic life. She was 84 years of age and pretty much had never used a computer. But to see her being able to continue her passion for history research, to email overseas friends, receive photos of her grandchildren was extraordinarily exciting, opening up for her a whole new world of enjoyment. Her connected tablet device is a marvellous window through which she could continue to explore her interests and literally wave to like-minded friends no matter where they were around the world. It's amazing to see how digital participation is being taken to new global levels by such people as Don Tapscott, who is a leading thinker on innovation and the impact of technology. Don spoke to us recently at Telstra on his visit to Australia about his new Global Solution Networks initiative, or GSNs. These are global web-based networks of interested individuals and institutions that come together over the internet to try and to solve wicked global problems, such as poverty, climate change, access to clean water, and human rights. And it's really amazing to think that you can actually get involved at the highest levels of global cooperation through the screen of the device you hold in your hands as you sit in your lounge room. And of course, the network connection, hopefully provided to you by Telstra, that makes it all possible. In conclusion, in this age where digital technology is a significant part of society, acquiring digital literacy and being able to benefit from using digital media competently with creativity and participation is one of the important ways to achieve social inclusion. Libraries will continue to have a critical role to play in developing these digital literacies among their communities, particularly for those who face barriers to access and understanding. Telstra is pleased to be working with libraries and other community centres to support digital literacy programs. We are doing this in two ways, reflecting the dual lens approach that is part of our own strategy. Firstly, by significantly investing in the capabilities of libraries and their staff to offer safe, secure environments for people to gain experience online through our partnership with the Alana and Madeline Foundation to make all libraries in Australia Australian eSmart libraries. This project is designed to equip libraries and to connect library users with the skills they need for safe, smart and responsible use of technology. Secondly, we are also doing this, as I've mentioned, by partnering with state governments in the Tech Savvy Senior program to offer digital literacy training through libraries and community hubs to encourage seniors to participate in the digital society. I wish you every success in your deliberations today that will hopefully connect the digital dots so that all Queenslanders may have the opportunity to become digital citizens and participate effectively in our global society. Thank you very much.
Is this one on? Hello. Okay, I might open up the floor now to some questions, and a bit of a roving microphone here. So if you have a question for Tim, now would be a good chance to ask it. Up the back there. I'm going to go this way.
Just a question. You're responsible for employee sustainability in your organisation. Now, there's a link with that with digital literacy. What's worked, I guess, in your organisation with like the generation, different generations coming through? And I'm just after some strategic, gems, I guess, you might have for...
So one of the things that is starting to work very well in Telstra is the concept of digital ambassadors. That is, we train up our people in a fairly basic way to assist people who are not familiar with smartphones or tablets to take their first step with those devices. And so it's been a real complement to the broader Tech Savvy Seniors program, which is a much more formal and structured program, so that in local towns and in suburbs, we have a couple of Telstra people as digital ambassadors who might go to the Country Women's Association and, meeting and bring the tablets and the smartphones and show them to people. The other thing that has also, we've found, has worked absolutely beautifully is where you bring an intergenerational element to digital literacy. And one of the things we've done there is work with local schools to bring the school kids into the digital literacy session to help the older Australians, and to see the interaction between the young people and the older people with the technology. It has just been beautiful, and the results for us there in terms of the literacy outcomes have been very good. So that's sort of what we're trying to do. We're very focused around that sort of older, the seniors audience. We've just recently completed translating a lot of our digital literacy materials into, I think, 7 or 8 languages for non-English speaking people. And we've also, it was interesting when we went out for volunteers within the organisation looking for digital ambassadors, we had a really high take-up of people who could speak other languages. Chinese speakers, Maltese speakers, Vietnamese speakers, our own employees willing to go back to their communities. And I think that's sort of reflecting that one of the hidden areas here around digital literacy is people with a non-English speaking background and the importance there. Hopefully that's helpful.
Another question up the back there.
Hi, thanks for a stimulating talk. It was a great start to the day. I'm particularly interested in the 86% of remote Indigenous community people who don't have access to the internet, and combining that with those beautiful touch technologies that are so intuitive and lovely to use. So our remote community people will skip the whole generation of computers at home, as you suggest, keyboards, etc. And so we've actually started providing a network to 70 communities of touchscreen kiosks that are public in these communities. What we're really interested in, that might be good to talk to you about, is those touch screens becoming, the community ones, becoming a Wi-Fi solution, so that all of those people in those remote communities can begin to have more access to the internet through their handheld devices.
So really, the Indigenous situation is as is often the case, very complex. You can walk down the main street of Alice Springs, you can walk down the main street of Cairns, and there's no shortage of Indigenous kids with smartphones. But is there access to computers in the home to assist the kids, with their schooling, often not, particularly in remote communities. One of the things that Telstra is involved with in partnership with the Northern Territory Government is firstly connecting the remote communities with mobile coverage. And that's a real economic challenge, it's a real commercial challenge. The simple truth is in the remote communities, there's not the return for Telstra making that investment, and equally there's not really the return for government. And so what we're seeing though, but if we partner together, Telstra and state governments, we can do some good work there. We're also exploring the concept of, it's one thing to have the technology, it's another thing to have the capability to use the technology. One of the pilots that we're looking at is this concept of Indigenous digital mentors. So people who can work within a community, be accessible to the community, and that very much one-on-one, high-touch environment assist people. And look, I'm not quite sure, but if the computer, turns off for some reason, my dad's stuffed. He loses his confidence to turn it back on, and it's often the very simple. You just flick this, and all of a sudden it comes back on, and Dad thinks it's magic, but it's just that basic sort of competence and capability to be able to leverage and use the technology. So that's something that we're involved in, but we should not underestimate the capacity of Indigenous communities to utilise the technology in remarkably innovative ways. And the best example I have is some work that's been done by the Telstra Foundation, in fact on Groot Island in the Gulf of Carpentaria. Up in Groot there's a particularly wicked disease called Mikado-Joseph disease. It's a bit like sort of Parkinson's. It's hereditary. It impacts certain families in remote communities in East Arnhem Land and basically takes away, over time, all muscle control. So you can't eat, you can't go to the toilet, you can't scratch yourself. It's a wicked, wicked disease. And one of the things we did was to provide the Mikado-Joseph Disease Foundation with some iPads. And the idea behind these iPads would be that people would be able to bank their speech. So before they lost their speech, through the iPad they'd be able to, bank it. And so, my name's Tim, this is my story, I need to go to the toilet, I'm itchy, I'm hungry, I need a glass of water. And the Indigenous people affected by that disease have been banking their speech. But more than that, they've been using the iPad to make movies. And they've been making movies around bush tucker and bush medicine and their dreaming stories, and using the iPad in ways that we would never have dreamt a remote Indigenous community that we would have thought may not have the wherewithal to access, to be able to use the smart technologies. And so it's remarkable the innovation that lies there. And just on a completely different sort of subject, my son has Down syndrome, and so struggles a lot with his learning and all of those sorts of things. He can use the mouse, on ABC for Kids, like nobody's business. And so the capacity of the technology to transform lives, to bring riches to people in ways that we would never have expected is quite extraordinary. Sorry, that's a long and rambling response, but hopefully that might be helpful.
One of the, challenges that we face, and I'm a rural library, is the backbone, the infrastructure. And we talk about digital literacy and all the things that we want to do, but if we haven't got decent infrastructure behind us, it's challenging. I've got a business level connection coming into our library, so I tested Netflix the other day. Great, brilliant. At home, I'm lucky if I can get 1 meg up. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
How do we ensure as libraries that digital services that we want to offer to our communities can be provided to those communities where the infrastructure just isn't there. And we talk about the NBN, and you know, all the reading you do online, there's a range of different viewpoints about the technology, all those particular issues. I'm just interested in your general observation.
Look, that's a very real situation. There is no magic wand. I'd say, like Telstra is investing $1 billion a year. This year we'll invest $1 billion in the mobile network. If you look at the Australian government, they'd be investing, well, I'm not quite sure what the total cost of the NBN is, but it's in the tens of billions of dollars. And these are very large infrastructure projects, and it's going to take time. And I think the other thing that is a real challenge for organisations like Telstra is just how reliant we now are on the connection. And just another sort of illustration is, I'm sure it's a bit similar in Queensland, but I'll use a Victorian example, is over summer, 1 million Melburnians will get up and move down to the coast, for the summer holidays. Now, 1 million Melburnians expect the same connection when they go on holidays to these small coastal towns. And that is a massive challenge for organisations like our own in relation to that infrastructure. But I think that if you look, and I think the other thing for us is just the challenge of our size, and the extraordinary size of our country. If you look at international comparisons, on a sort of a like-for-like basis, particularly in rural areas, Australia is doing okay. But that's a little comfort to you in terms of the very specific needs that you have. The NBN is coming. It's going to take time. Telstra is investing $1 billion a year in the mobile network. That will continue over the next little while. And, the government is investing in the black spots program where you have, particular dropout points or black areas where there's no coverage. But there is no simple fix for that one.
We have time for one more question if somebody has.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your Tech Savvy Seniors program. Is that similar to the broadband for seniors, or is that a quite different program?
The Tech Savvy Seniors program is a partnership at this point between the Telstra and the New South Wales government and Telstra and the Victorian government. And what it involves is the production of, I think, really some of the best digital literacy curriculum focused on older Australians, and that being trained and rolled out through libraries and community colleges. I think this year we'll do in excess of 100,000. We'll look to train up more than 100,000 older Australians. It's by far the largest digital literacy program in the country. We are having further conversations with a range of state governments in terms of expanding that program. I'm not at liberty to discuss which state governments we are talking to, but there'll be some of those will be close to home here around extending that program throughout more states in Australia. It's my colleague here, Heather Ray, is really sort of the architect of that work. It's really one of the loveliest things that Telstra does, and we've used the program to bring in school kids as a sort of a further vehicle, that intergenerational connection that I spoke about before. the sort of the feedback on the evaluation of the program is consistently very high. And I think the other thing is that it really plays to the strengths of libraries as community centres. One of the things, which I'm a bit embarrassed to say, that I really hadn't been back to a public library, since going to university until really joining Telstra. And I was struck just how, what community resources they are. And I went out to a public library in the northern suburbs of Melbourne, and it was full, at 3:30 in the afternoon, it's full of school kids accessing the Wi-Fi. During the day it was older men coming into the library looking to do up their CV to apply for jobs. There are older Australians, looking at their sort of family tree. I'm telling you people, nothing there. But I think one of the good things about Tech Savvy Seniors is leveraging libraries, community colleges, those community digital hubs that can be so important around digital literacy.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much, Tim. Could you please thank Tim OLeary for us? Fantastic. So many great points there, Tim. I think for myself, the never thought I would part, I never thought I would see Telstra payphones turned into internet hotspots where people would gather around so they could gather around an old payphone so they could connect their mobile phone to browse the internet. Certainly a sign of where we're headed and of what's important to us as consumers, but also, as you said, the transition from consumption into participation being quite a significant milestone in terms of our use of the technology and also how it impacts our lives and our involvement in society. So thank you very much for that.